Welcome to the show, folks. I'm super excited that you're all here. I really am. I do want to bring in Dr. Dan Schaefer. And what I'm going to do is actually, instead of going through a long introduction and so forth, I will say that he has worked with numerous, and I'm going to say hundreds, but of executives and athletes, and really helped them with their performance. But more importantly, really how to sort of break through. And it's interesting. A lot of coaches out there and people that do a lot of this sort of work sort of often have a lot of standard ways of doing things. What I was really fascinated with when I first spoke to Dan was that he's got some, as far as I'm concerned, some unique and effective ways to look past some of your weaknesses and turn them into your strengths. And he's a fascinating gentleman. He's also sort of a neighbor. He's out on Long Island, which is that way. And I'm thrilled to have him on board. So Dan, why don't you come on in? Before we jump into this, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that very specifically in maybe 20, 30 seconds that you want to mention to everybody that just sort of maybe lays the groundwork for what got you started in this sort of work and why you do it?
Sure. I seem to, over a period of time, deal with people who were in high pressure situations by themselves without resources. In the 80s, I wrote a book on helping parents explain death to kids, to help parents more easily communicate with their children. That went into 4 editions. I worked with the Pentagon for 7 years on military laws, looking at anything that got in the way that impacted performance. And so it was errors, omissions, accidents, and safety, and how that compared. That led me into spending a lot of time in studying and developing hypnosis strategies to help people quickly get the results they want. So this is not what you see on stage. It's not Hollywood's hypnosis. But I started to deal with the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. For the people on this call, I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but your conscious mind is very intelligent because of everything you do. But your subconscious mind is really very smart. So I don't know exactly what brought you each to this program tonight, or what your conscious mind needs to hear, but I know your subconscious mind is capable of hearing exactly what it needs and when it needs it. So what I want to do is take it into my strategies with athletes and business people, because I've said in numerous occasions that I think the difference between sports and business is speed. So every one of my clients today is in 2027 working backwards. There's a reason for that.
Wait, so cool, quick question for you, because back to I want to talk about the subconscious thing, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in my subconscious, and I'm not sure how much of it's any good. So I'm curious to know, when you reference that, are you suggesting it's subconscious while we're awake? Is it while we're asleep? What's that mean?
Well, the way that I use it is if you look at an athlete, if you look at a baseball player or a hockey goalie or a quarterback or a football player, or Marlon, when he played, he did stuff he didn't even think about it. He just acted. So because stuff happens so quickly, they've already developed strategies and put those strategies into their subconscious mind and has them operate effectively. So the question is, I run into in business a lot of people who are very talented people, but don't have a target. And so for me, the interesting thing about the subconscious mind is that one of the interesting things is that it must act out every thought, image, or idea you put into it. And it will do that relentlessly unless you get in its way. So my business no matter whether it's an athlete, a student athlete, a woman in business, whatever it is that to make sure that they don't get in their way and disrupt their plan and their dream. A lot of this, Mark, has to do with dreaming. This is absolutely not goal setting. What I do is not therapy. It's really strategy. So where do you want to be? How do we get there? And what are the kind of things that could disrupt that process?
That's interesting. And because, it's funny, there's some people that somehow remember a lot of their dreams when they wake up and so forth. And there's others that things happen, but they don't remember them and so forth. And I'm somewhere in between where, and we also have those ones where we feel like we're falling and everything else. But it's interesting when you talk about that, because a lot of times coaching focuses on just the conscious. And if there's a way to, as you say, sort of inject certain things into the subconscious, that can only help. So that's fascinating. Now, jumping ahead to what you just said a minute ago, and I cut you off, and I'm sorry about that, but when you said something about focusing on 2027, I think all of us are thinking, wait a second, we're just focusing on tomorrow. We're focusing on the next day. We're focusing on maybe gearing up for the early part of 2022. How on earth can you think about something 5 years from now? What's
Imagine for a moment that if you were to take yourself forward and dream about what 2027 would look like, and you discovered that that dream was dragging you toward it rather than you struggling toward it, you find that a lot of things get dropped into this box as you move forward that really help and work in that way. And there's there's an invisible dynamic, and a lot of the stuff that I deal with is invisible. I expect there to be skepticism, which is fantastic when you control it, but if you don't control it, it controls you. So, and I'm open to people calling me to ask me about this or talk about it when we get in the chat rooms. But there's a dynamic called short-term discomfort versus long-term regret. I may not want to deal with you now, whatever your business is, but I'll tell you what you really don't want. I don't want to be in 2027 looking backwards, wishing that I did. And when I worked with Hewlett Packard executives around the world, when they were in the middle of the merge with Compaq, the question was how frequently could they get somebody that they were talking to out of the present into the future and then work backwards? Because that really comes back to what you want to have happen, not what somebody else has happened, but how do you help somebody get what they want, identify what they want, and the targets can be changed. But I've seen people who dreamt about kids who dreamt about a career in a professional sport, and all of a sudden they find themselves there. How does that happen? So it's keeping people on track.
Well, so a second ago when you said, well, it's one thing where instead of saying sort of no now to business and then regretting 5 years from now that you didn't do it. I mean, I think part of that is the whole concept of fear of missing out, right? And the concept that if part of it is that you don't want to miss out on that, but the other part of it is the fear of going into it. It's almost like, when someone jumps into the pool, they're bracing for that initial cold and they don't go in because they it's too cold. But the second they're in, they start swimming around, they're having a great time. So I think there's some of that there where what we need to do is really focus much more on that whole the 2027 view and think, well, what's happening then, and how can we? I mean, is it something where you focus on what are the steps that we can take to get to that happiness of 2027 or that goal, whatever that goals are, and then almost is it sort of like reverse, engineering, or what's it?
Great question. Once you have the dream set, then you don't have to think about it anymore. Subconscious mind takes care of it. The way I look at it, the subconscious mind is sitting there saying, I can help you with all this stuff. Just tell me what you want me to do. Otherwise, I'll sit back and be quiet. So it's helping people move in that direction. So one of the challenges that we talk about is that, when we look at the people who really are, it's difficult today to be in business today. It's challenging to be in business today, but it's really dangerous to be in business when you don't know you're in business. And I look at that as kids in school, athletes who misbehave. The point is that everybody is running their own business. Everyone is a CEO of their own company.
True.
And when you get, particularly if you're dealing with kids, if you get a kid to see themselves as a CEO of their own company, then every decision they make becomes a business decision. What they eat, what they drink, what they smoke, who they're seen with, who takes their picture, what they put on Facebook, all that becomes business decisions. So the kid has a decision. Do I want to enhance my business or screw up my business? So, I one of my grandchildren is a hockey player, hockey goalie, and he was at a goalie camp out here with the Islanders some years ago. And the coach said to me, he said, I have an assistant, an incredible kid, freshman in high school, incredible goalie, but he's driving his parents crazy because, his grades are terrible.
Mm.
So the father said, could I retain you to work with my son? So the first thing I said to the kid, I said, what's going on? He said, my parents are up my butt for my grades. I said, well, don't you know your parents make no difference here? He said, well, who makes a difference? I said, the college coach who wants to recruit you now, but doesn't know if you can stay academically eligible when you get there. I had an agent call me to help a guy go through the combine, football combine. And he came back, he said to me, he said, we've had guys that came in here, worked their whole life to get where they were. And somehow or other, they failed a drug test at the end and they were blown out. So you wonder about how people look at what their behavior is, and is it helping me toward my goal or not? And I've had some of my clients comment that this You Incorporated really becomes a concept that really it becomes very interesting to them.
Now, I think part of that also turns into, you talked earlier about people that run businesses and entrepreneurs, and then you also talk about athletes, and especially in today's world, there's so much, I guess we'll say stress, right? Because look, back in the 1800s, 1900s, before social media, before everything, you had stress, but your stress was, okay, how do I support the family? How do I get enough food on the table? That sort of thing. But now there's just things coming at us 24/7. What are some of the things that you like to, if you're speaking to someone who clearly is exhibiting stress, I mean, do you have a trick or two that someone can use to help lower that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first of all, stress is a distraction. I know we'll touch on the distraction later. We can do it now. If everybody on this call would just please sit up straight in your chair and start to move your right foot clockwise, round and round, round and round, round and round, round and round. And now with your right hand, draw a big number 6 in the air. See your foot go backwards? So the point is, the question comes back, can you afford 1 second of distraction? So if stress depends how you identify it. I had a woman who came to me some years ago. She said, I'm terribly stressed. She was handicapped. She was running a foundation. And she said, I need you to use hypnosis to make the stress go away. I said, spend a week looking at everything you're doing and identify what's stress. Tell me what really is stressing you out. She came back at the end of the week. She said, I realized that the things I interpreted as stress were really the action that helped me get my life going and keep going. So some of it was stress, other than not. And you mentioned something before about people who are afraid, they have fear of performance, people who will get butterflies in their stomach and all of that. And, I've got a couple of examples of that. And one woman is an ultra marathon runner who was running the Badwater through Death Valley, ultimately became an MMA cage fighter at 55 and won her last fight in 49 seconds. She said to me, I feel butterflies in my stomach. But I said, if you interpret that as fear, you'll have to act afraid. But what if it's a drop of adrenaline? What if what you're really feeling is an adrenaline drop and you look forward to it? So I worked with a heavyweight prize fighter, and he said to me, he said, I don't feel comfortable if I don't have that. So where's that extra adrenaline that I need? So it's how people interpret what's going on in their body and becoming very aware of what it's like when they perform at their best. What's your A game feel like, look like, and sound like? I know you mentioned that in your book about people's A game.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you. Wow, nice plug. I like that. Before we go any further,
I've got a couple of more if you have some time.
Oh, of course I do. Plenty of time for that. Just super fast. If any of you have any questions at all for Dan or myself, there's on the right side, you'll see it says chat participants and Q&A. Please go into that Q&A section and enter your question. And if you want to be anonymous, fine. Or if you want to identify who you are, that's fine too. But if you have any questions at all, please go in there, and we'll be happy to ask and answer those in a little bit.
Hey,
So
can I address the
yeah,
question in 1 second?
sure.
I anticipated questions when I come into events.
Yeah.
But hockey goaltenders years ago, and there were 90 of them, I did a clinic and I said, are there any questions? No questions. So at the end, there were 40 kids lined up along the wall that said to me, I would never ask a question in front of people who I'm competing with. I was asked to be a speaker at a dental association, and they were all general dentists. And the guy who hired me to do this, the talk, said to me, I was very disappointed. He said, there were no questions. I said, well, all these people are competing with each other. They're never going to ask questions. So I have a confidential sounding board. If you go on my website, which we'll talk about later, arrange a 15-minute conversation with me, that conversation never happened. And so that's the way I operate. So
Told you he was in the CIA. Anyways, no, that's great. And it's interesting because I know exactly what you're saying. It's not just a question when you have athletes in a room and they don't want to, but it's the same thing with a lot of times with high performers. They feel that if they ask a question, it's showing a weakness sometimes. So I think that in this case here, though, please feel free to ask away. I guess Alan did ask, talk a little bit about the Sir Lawrence Olivier syndrome. What is that? You know what that is?
I don't know.
All right, so Alan, you're going to have to jump into the Q&A section and talk a little bit more about that. So tell me a little bit about, something that you like to do that would help people learn how to control distraction.
I could, well, one of the things that's interesting is, first of all, you can't control what you can't see, hear, or feel.
Okay.
So I'll come back to one of my goalies. I said to him, what's it like, and you talk about your A game, what's it like when you perform at your best? He says, I don't hear any crowds. The puck is the size of a dinner plate, and the game moves very, very slowly. When any one of those things change, I know I'm losing my concentration. I said, okay, what do you do then? He said, I hope that it comes back. I said, well, hope isn't a strategy.
No.
So let me show everybody here how to completely eliminate that type of an experience. Wherever you are, focus on something right in the middle of your desk, whatever it is. And don't move your eyeballs from that item, whatever it is. And now, without moving your eyeballs, become aware of what's on your left and what you're aware of on your right. And I get all those three things together. And when you get what's the object on your right, the object on your left, and what's in front of you all together, try to think of something. You can't think of anything. So if you need to focus and concentrate in any situation, just expand your peripheral vision right and left. Now, this works as well for sports, business, bar exams, CPA exams, kids that need to focus and concentrate. And, to me, I said to a guy from the Mets one time, years ago, I said, what's concentration? He says, concentration is thinking about absolutely nothing at just the right time. So when I talk to a baseball player about stepping into the batter's box, absolutely no thought. That's where the subconscious mind takes over. And, Marlon will tell you, he made plays that he didn't even know he made, like he make it. How did that happen? It's because the subconscious already took over and did it for him. And it's the other factor that comes up here on a large scale is preparation for competition. What astounds me is the amount of people in business who go out and don't prepare for what they're going. You mentioned that in the book. You have to prepare for interviews. You have to know who you're going to talk to. You have to know what, and particularly what you're going to say. And my best example for preparation for competition is Super Bowl III. Yes, I was around for Super Bowl III. Dave Herman protected Joe Namath and Bubba Smith. And Dave was 6'2", 250. Bubba Smith was 6'5" or 6'6", 300, something like that. So I said, how did you do that? He said, I watched game films. I said, well, I've had athletes watching game films in my office. I said, what did you watch for? I thought it was formations. He says, no. He said, when a guy that big has got to move forward, he has to be standing on 1 foot just a little bit longer than everybody else. He said, I know he wouldn't move until the ball was snapped. So I just waited until I saw the toe come up. So it astounds me. Here's a guy in the Super Bowl, 4 quarters, numerous downs to win the game. And there are people who will go out and do a presentation, try to pitch their business, try to get a job, and they don't prepare. So if you could profile the person you're going to speak to the same way he profiled Bubba Smith, you'd be in a lot. So it's skills and talents that athletes have that they don't even know they have. They just use them so often, so frequently. So it's how do you identify what you do well and transfer it into a situation where you can teach somebody else? Because one of the truest facts around is that you can't teach somebody what you don't know that you know. So a lot of what my work is helping people to find out just how good they are and get all this together, and particularly with kids.
That's a great. So, quick question. Brandy Chastain is here, and she wants to know: are young people really capable of the business of what they want? Are they able to, knowing how to differentiate fear and discomfort and lack of experience and the responsibility can be hard for these young developing minds. Are they?
Absolutely. Great,
Okay.
great question. Some are, some aren't, but I figure there's nothing to be lost putting this out to a kid. I have kids who are in 8th grade who have their own business cards. Why? Because when he gets a business card with his name on it, all of a sudden he's locked into his business. And the question is, this is for some people, other people it's not for at all. So the question is you put the tools out there. You say, here are the things we can use, and go on that way. I worked with a Major League Soccer team for a year on mental strategies, and I only talked about the mind game stuff, not anything about the strategy of playing. But again, it's how do we make that happen? So it's offering these, and I will tell you, kids buy into this tremendously well.
It's I can see how that would be the case simply because just the notion of, it's interesting. And I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, when you have a business card, it doesn't matter how old or young you are. It's sort of like it's a tangible evidence of a level of accomplishment, regardless of how much it is. But for example, when I first got, okay, this is a shameless plug, but when I first got a copy of my book Win Again, available on Amazon, of course. No, I'm kidding. But when I first got that first copy, it was kind of like, oh my God, here's like an actual something that I can hold on to that I've done. And it sort of made me feel that much. I mean, it made me just feel that much better. It was a sense of accomplishment. And I think the same thing happens if I agree. And, the more I think about this, that when you give a young, a boy or a girl who's a preteen or a teen or something, a business card where it may just say Nancy Smith Inc. or LLC or something like that, they may be more focused on wanting to perform better, but treat it all as being more serious about them as a business.
Well, since you did a shameless plug, I'll talk about when I opened my first box of books. Click the Competitive Edge.
And there we go.
The book I opened, the print had been put in backwards. So the whole written part of the book was backwards.
Okay.
So I handed the book around to people, not knowing that had happened. And somebody said to me, "This is brilliant." I said, "What's brilliant?" He says, you help people work backwards and stuff, and they put the stuff in the book backwards. But again, but give me just a second. I want to go get my card because there's something on the back of the card. And if there's a way I could get this out to people, and kids love this. Hang on just a second.
Yeah. In the meantime, like I said, please feel free to jump in with any additional questions you have. I mean, what's really interesting about all this stuff is that a lot of this advice is aimed at or can be aimed at athletes, but it's also aimed at anybody running a business or anybody in a business that is looking to be that much more successful and perform at a higher level. So let's see it.
The back of the card says, "Every day and everywhere I get better and better and better." So people have said to me, I have this taped up on my computer. I've had it for years. And I said, you know what you have to do? You have to take it off, turn it over, and call the guy on the other side.
Yeah.
But if there's a way to get these out to people, it's 10 times a night, 60 days straight, just before you go to sleep. And I have some people who've said this to their children who couldn't read, and a check off it. So do people use it? Some do, some don't.
Mm.
It's a tool that works because it works on the subconscious mind.
Well, let's talk about the conscious mind, I guess, for a minute. There's one of the things that I know you like to talk about is controlling self-talk. And tell me a little bit about what is self-talk and how do you control that?
Almost anybody on this call can come back to think about the way they talk to themselves. So I would say to you, what does Mark hear Mark say when Mark overhears Mark talking to Mark? And then it changes in situations. Some cases it's very positive, other it's not. So the question is, can I really control my self-talk? That was one of the big issues that came up with this soccer team that I worked with. How do they talk about themselves in the context of their performance? So the point is that controlling self-talk becomes very interesting. And there's a way to do it instantly, because some people experience it as a running loop of beating themselves up. And everybody knows that trash talk works very well in some sports. It works exceptionally well on yourself because it's in your own voice. So the question is, how quickly do you stop it? I'm going to give you a tip right now to stop it instantly. Right now, everybody on a call, push your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. When your tongue is on the roof of your mouth, you can't think of anything. So at any time that you want to stop the self-talk, just push your tongue to the roof of your mouth and it'll stop. So if you're driving,
Okay.
we're talking about Long Island. If you valet park your car in Manhattan and you're driving to Montauk on the end of Long Island, and the valet gets in and he puts some music on it you absolutely hate, what do? You turn it off because you have other stations, or you turn the whole radio off. What you don't do is find yourself halfway to Montauk saying, this stuff is still playing. So, and the biggest issue is that when you talk about self-talk, it's the damage that can happen to performance when you tell yourself what you don't want to have happen. Because you can come back to major football games, particularly when the Patriots played the Giants, and somebody said to me, who do you think is going to win? I said, I think the Patriots are going to find a way to lose. They had won 18 straight games. And they said, why would you say that? I said, because I believe they're coming in saying, we don't want to lose this next game. Whereas the Giants were saying, we want to win. And you can look at situations over and over and over again. Talk to Richie Gertler about somebody that stands up on a tee and says, I don't want to hit the ball in the water. Where's it going? So, but it's to be very careful. So we look at teammates who talk that way, monitoring the conversation. I know that a lot of coaching, it's locker room coaching. People will come back and talk about, don't do this, don't do that, don't do something else. And I worked with the U.S. ski team out in Vail. And what they did is they had these kids that slalom runs over and over again, and they put them into a cinder block office room. It was hot. And then they went the videos over, and then as the coach was going over and saying, don't do this, don't do that. And what they were doing was reinforcing the negative behavior. So does this work for everybody? No. Does everybody buy into it? Absolutely no. Do people think it's crazy? Absolutely. Are there people pushing back on this? And one of the biggest issues that we talk about is the way the brain works. If we're talking about the difference between business and sports, everybody traditionally, conventional wisdom says, sell the features and benefits of what you do.
Now that's really impressive. Now, so do me a favor, actually, someone just quickly asked if you could hold up the back of that card again, your business card. They want to write it down.
If there's a way you could get it to people.
Yeah, but every day, go ahead.
Every day, in every way, I get better and better and better. Now, why at night before you go to sleep? Because the last thing you think about before you go to sleep is repeated over and over by your subconscious mind while you're sleeping. So, I mean, you can do it anytime you want, but people who do it at night, kids love this. Kids love this. And some very high performing athletes use this too, and they have for years. But the other thing about it is I discovered, I'm sure other people have, that people don't give away their competitive edge. So they say, why don't people talk about you? They just don't give their edge away. I mean, I commented on a client of mine who's an MMA cage fighter. She's 55 years old. Her last fight was in Oregon. We used power visualization over the phone for 3 weeks before the fight. She went in and won a fight in 49 seconds. And the ring announcer said, what do you attribute your success to? She says, I'm an ultra runner. You can never, ever tire me out. You might beat me, but you'll never tire me out. And they said, what do you attribute your success to? She went on and talking about it. I said to her, Jody, I said, you never thanked me. She says, do you think I'm giving your name to somebody who's going to fight in a month? So that, and I've seen that over and over again. So, people just don't give their edge away.
Interesting. And I know that there's some folks that may say, well, look, because like in my case, with my coaching and so forth, there's certain things that I like to think is in my secret sauce, and I tend to, maybe I'll say, give it away. But someone once told me, because I worried about that, and someone said, well, Mark, you may be giving away the ingredients, but you're still the cook. You may give someone the recipe, but you're still the cook on that. But that's really, it's an interesting perspective. Now, in terms of, you spoke earlier about we talked about this controlling the self-talk and so forth, but how do you, restore that confidence completely? Because I mean, look, I've been in situations where I've said, gosh, I'll see how other people are doing certain things. I'll say, golly, I feel like I'm better than they are, but why am I not getting the results? What's going on? And I may feel a little, I may be losing some of that confidence. How do I get that back up again?
If I could give you 2 words to solve that, would you be interested?
Yeah, all day.
Stop it. When you hear the conversation, if the conversation is positive and enhancing and encouraging, listen to it. If it's not, shut it off.
Okay. I mean, sometimes easier said than done, right? I mean,
push your tongue to the roof of your mouth and tell me when it doesn't work. Works every single time. Your tongue on the roof of your mouth, you can't think of anything. So if you have to shut it off 100 times a day, but the question is that, and it comes back to one of the things that another plug for your book, preparation for competition to me is important. So if somebody is going into a situation, they have to prepare for who they're going to be competing against. And so you use that conversation. And one of the biggest issues is, can you get to the point where you can trust your subconscious, trust your training? People do it automatically. I'm sure when you talk to talk to Marlon, he trusted his training.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about football, what kind of distractions the football players have? What do they bring onto the field that doesn't belong there? They have to deal with the media. They have to deal with coaches sometimes. They have to deal with some team members who have not brought their A game to the field. And so that's part of the challenge. But again, it's going out and trusting your training, trusting your management that they're going to give you an offensive line to protect you.
And, it's interesting because it's obviously the same thing. I mean, this is how our militaries are prepared, right? It's all about teaching our soldiers and those who support the soldiers the notion that it's got to be instinctual and it's got to be immediate, but it's not just muscle memory, it's mind memory, it's everything. But with an athlete, when an athlete has to make a split-second decision, they've already been trained to make that decision in advance, and they've been taught ways to make that decision. So that makes perfect sense.
And they don't think about it. But in high pressure situations, and a lot of people in business today are alone at the top. So I've said to some people, take a look around you. If you're alone at the top, do you have people you can rely on? Do you have a team that you can rely on and trust? I mean, I know you talked about military. I work with an active shooter team from Port Authority on working on how to help guys focus and concentrate when they're in high pressure situations. And a lot of people only have one shot to make something work. When somebody goes out for an interview, like we're talking right now, you talked about big events that people go into and they have to prepare for that. So they're going into the holidays. So somebody said to me, when's the best time to promote yourself? If you know how to, and this comes back, another plug for Mark's book. If you come back and you know what you do, you know how to describe it well, and you meet somebody at an event, even in this meeting rooms when we get finished, when somebody says, what do you do? What do you say? Now, I can tell you what I say. When somebody says, what do you do? I said, I sell mistakes. So people say, well, who would ever want to buy a mistake? I'll say somebody who doesn't want to make one. It's cheaper to buy somebody else's mistake than to make your own. But everybody, no matter what business they're in, can make a list of mistakes that their clients made before they became your client and what that mistake cost them in money, emotion, or reputation. I have an attorney that I said to him, he was a client of mine, and I said to him, give me a mistake that somebody made. He says, I'll give you about a $350,000 handshake. He said, I have a client right now who is in the process of closing up a partnership that he started 15 years ago with a friend, no legal documents, and it's going to cost him $350,000 to get out of that business he started on a handshake. So the attorneys in the room will say, you have to talk to me first. Richie Gertley used to say, talk to me early. I'm not going to be charging you a lot, but if I talk to you when you go on too far, then it becomes complicated.
Right.
So, but this is no different than and I'll throw an example out with Alan Chasson. Alan we talked a little bit about this before we started, but we were talking about him reviewing a contract for a major restaurant owner in the city. And the guy said, well, my lawyer drew this up. And he said, let me look at it. So he looked at it and he found one word missing in the contract, and it was the word latent. He said, so that word latent saved his client $150,000. So everybody has this resource of information, but they don't necessarily look at it because the brain does not work on features and benefits, guys. The brain works on skepticism, reactance, and inertia. If you control skepticism, it's wonderful. If you let it control you, it'll shut you off. You walk out of this conference with absolutely nothing. Reactance is, I don't want to be sold. Well, I don't think I sell, Mark, but people sell themselves on working with us. And inertia is all the things you need to do to change what you're doing already. But what they discovered is that if you can profile the audience you're talking to, and you can look at the skepticism that they might feel in that situation, the reactance that you're not going to be sold, and the inertia, and you present that up front, you get a 30 to 50% higher close rate on a deal.
Wow, that's great.
So, but it requires preparation for company. But people are still, Mark, wandering in. I'm going to say what I always say. So the question is coming back to what you said in your book, another quote for the book, think if you're going into an environment, what might the conversation be? What is somebody going to say to you? And how are you going to describe what you do? And then how do you come in with all the people on this call who have all the contacts that you have? You could say to somebody, tell me who you need to meet, and I'll make the introduction. I do the same thing. What do you need to have happen right now that's not happening? I'm not talking about next week, but I will tell you that going into this holiday season, not prepared to tell people what you do without even saying how you do it. I'll give you an example. If somebody wants to send me an email, it just says mistakes, I'll send you this article called "Is Money and Mistakes." But the point is that the woman who was the editor of the magazine that published the article said to me, Danny, what do you do? She said, nobody knows what you do. I said, I know, nobody talks about it. But I said, I can show you what I do. She had a glass of red wine. And I said, you like red wine? She said, yes. I said, okay. I said, you're going to be surprised to notice that when you put the key in the door to your apartment, you open a lock, you put your hand down to the doorknob. The minute your hand hits the doorknob, you're going to think of red wine. She says, oh, come on. So later, she said it went on and on and on. I never touched it, but the application of that to business, executive performance, leadership development is absolutely amazing.
That's pretty cool. Now, I'm going to wrap this up in a couple minutes, but I just there's one thing you also talk about. One last thing I want to push on, which I completely agree with, and I try to do it myself. But it's what you talk about using power visualization and really focusing on sort of almost like, I'll say, greatest hits, thinking about your greatest hits kind of thing. But tell me a little bit more about if someone, if they're either about to do a big presentation, or they need to get their confidence up, or they are maybe on the other hand thinking, gee, maybe I'm not so good at doing blank. What would you tell me a little bit about what that means, power visualization?
First of all, almost everything you've done is stored in your subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So I could say I'll use Richie because he's here. And Richie also, I don't know if he brought pictures of his trophy with him, but the thing is that you can say, I want you to picture the best drive you ever made. And close your eyes and you imagine that the inside of your eyelids are flat screen TVs. And just watch yourself tee the ball up, watch yourself hit the drive and watch it go. Now, how does that work for somebody? I'm working with an athlete now who's one of the top gymnasts in the country, who's rehabbing. I did that with other people in sports who've rehabbed. So that you can go through all the plays. You can go through your playbook visually. And the interesting thing about that is that your subconscious mind never knows whether you actually did it or thought about it. I've seen that with slalom skiers, football players, field goal kickers. Makes no difference. But if you continue to play that video over and over and over again in your mind, when you get back on the field, you're going to be surprised at how little you've lost, because it's all in the subconscious. All the performance is already in the subconscious mind. So how do you take this stuff and transfer it over to a team or to people who have no interest in it? Some people will buy into it, others won't. If somebody is interested in the evaluation from this Major League Soccer team, sends me an email that says soccer, I'll send it to you. These are the things that they feel were important. Not that I felt were important, but they feel were important to them, and it would help them in their career. But once again, it was anonymous. They never put their names on it. Nobody knew who was asking the question, but it was important stuff to them. And this is what this is about, Mark. It's, when you can take somebody who wants to move from point A to point B quickly, not slowly, because slow is not working for people anymore. Mm-mm. And so how can we make it happen quickly? And that's what this is about. And it can go in any. So with the power visualization, a heavyweight prize fighter that was going to be fighting in Atlantic City. We went through the whole fight 3 weeks before he went down to Atlantic City. He decided he was going to end it in the 4th round, which he did, but he saw himself end it. My client, Jody, who ended it in 49 seconds, she was in the cage before her opponent ever left home because she'd been in it. So she went in and it was just... And I will tell you that you talk to your athletes, they do this on a regular basis. My question is, do they know how well they do it? And can they teach other people to do it? Can they coach other people to do it? I believe they can, because it's all mind game. I mean, I have no delusion that I would be able to coach, get on a soccer field with somebody, a football field, but I only deal with the mental part. which is a big component of it. So what does somebody bring onto the field that doesn't belong there? And then leave it. Don't bring it. Avoid bringing it.
That's amazing. That's great. So if people want to hear more, and they do, what's the best way, number one, to get a hold of you, and tell me about your, is it a website? Can they schedule a 15-minute call, et cetera?
Sure. If they go on a website, it's danschaeferphd.com. Just go on, book a 15-minute appointment. It's complimentary. There's no, just come and tell me what you need to have happen. It's not happening. And we go on from there.
I might take more than 15 minutes, but okay.
I'll give you more than 15 minutes. You wrote a great book. Tell me more about your book. I want to tell you one other thing about my book.
Yeah, please.
You did. I tell people, don't read the book. If you scroll, this is trusting your subconscious. You scroll the table of contents, your subconscious mind will tell you exactly what you need to read for the next deal you're going into. Does it every single time. Because if what you need today is on page 231, you're never getting to it.
Good point.
That's what I did with your book. I scrolled the table of contents. I picked up the things that I thought would be interesting.
Wait a second. So I'm going to have to read to you the rest of the book that you didn't find interesting, and we're going to go from there. I'm kidding. So no, that's fantastic. And so I encourage everybody here to feel free to book that call. When you say complimentary, does that mean you're going to spend those 15 minutes complimenting them? I'm assuming, right? That's what you mean by compliment. I'm joking.
No, it's a great question. I want them to get in touch with what they need to have happen.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we talk about, it's to find out what they. Let me address one thing about people in here who are fundraising. I guarantee golfers 3 to 6 strokes off their golf game without touching a club. And I have a certificate. It's a $500 certificate that I will send to whoever wants one to help them to auction it off. At a live auction is the best way not to leave money on the table. But if you live in a golf community and you want this to work, you will be astounded at how well this stuff works. And if anybody wants to connect with Richie Gertler, other than somebody needing a fantastic attorney, that's what I would do with this. Take a look at it.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'll send it out to you. So it's when you get the certificate, you can triple it. It's men only, women only, and juniors.
Okay.
Now, if somebody gets that certificate, decides to put it in a silent auction in a frame and have bids on it, you're leaving a tremendous amount of money on the table. Just look at the frame with the certificate in it and see all this cash that's laying on the table that your organization is not going to get. But I donated a corporate program to BlackRock Financial for kids with cancer. This is probably about 12, 14 years ago. And it was auctioned off at a Wall Street auction for $27,000. So,
wow. All right. That's no small sum.
Golfers want to get better.
I feel that pain. I would love to too. Well, Dan, I really appreciate your time today, and this has all been super fascinating. And I think you're going to find a bunch of people that will be spending some significant time, number one, trying to turn their right leg clockwise and write the number 6 and see if they can beat it, and they won't be able to. Number 2, they'll be closing their eyelids and looking at the inside as if they're little flat screen TVs. Number 3, they will be putting their tongue to their mouth and trying to see if they can think of other things when that's happening. So
self-talk. Just use it to shelf it. So I had a client of mine, and I'll wrap up with this. Client of mine said to me, "My mother wants to meet with you." He said, "My mother's 84. She plays golf." So we met her. I met her at the Yale Club in the city. And I said to her, "What do you want to have happen?" She says, "This is in confidence. You're not going to tell my son?" I said, "No, I'm not telling him." Yeah. She said, "I want to beat my friends in golf." So I gave her this strategy. And one summer afternoon, I'm sitting here and she calls me and she goes, "Dang, I spent the whole day with my tongue on the roof of my mouth."
That's
so
there you go.
Yeah, I will send you a bunch of these cards. I don't know how you can get them out to people, but
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We have fire away, and I've got people's addresses, so that's great. Dan, thank you so much. We're going to go back now, back to the tables and chat some more with some of these folks who I'm assuming will be much more interested in hearing more about you and your work. So thanks again, and thank you all for being a part of this. And now let's jump back. Thanks so much.